I am Miles Taylor. This is Defiance Daily, dispatches for the defiant. This is a week that my friends Maritza Georgiou and John Tester said feels like a year, and it absolutely has been. On Monday of this week, Washington, D.C. was still reeling over Donald Trump's invasion of Venezuela and seizure of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. But as we made our way into the week, a series of controversies have roiled Washington, the country, and the world. From the shooting in Minnesota that the administration says was the result of a domestic terrorist attack against ICE agents, but which most people who've seen the video believe was clearly murder, to the president's ongoing comments about seizing the territory of a NATO ally, Greenland, circling all the way back to continued controversy around Venezuela, as members of Congress are upset that it seems like oil executives were both consulted before and have been consulted more frequently in the aftermath of that military escalation in terms of what comes next in that country. And importantly, yesterday, Republican members of Congress took an initial vote in the Senate to constrain the president's war powers abilities in Venezuela and to try to forestall the possibility of a second attack. And members of Congress are talking about more votes to come to do exactly that when it comes to other countries. A lot to talk about today. We have two incredible guests. Shortly, we will bring in Sue Gordon, the former spy chief during the first Trump administration, the deputy director of national intelligence, and former CNN Pentagon correspondent and award-winning journalist Barbara Starr. This is Defiance Daily, dispatches for the defiant. But let's start with Donald Trump meeting with oil executives. The U.S. has seized another Venezuelan-linked oil tanker in the Caribbean, adding to two earlier seizures this week. This is becoming a pattern. Donald Trump and his administration are trying to hoover up as much oil as possible from Venezuela, realizing it gives them leverage, resources, and money. Trump said he does not think a second wave of attacks in Venezuela is necessary, halting a planned second wave of attacks after Venezuela cooperated with U.S. demands, including a pledge to release political prisoners, but also, of course, coming in the wake of Congress, as I noted, saying that the president will be hamstrung if he tries to conduct a second attack in that country. Now, Trump says he will soon decide which U.S. oil companies are allowed to enter Venezuela and rebuild its energy sector, claiming the deals will total at least $100 billion. However, oil industry executives in the meeting expressed serious reservations in fronting the bill to rebuild Venezuela's energy infrastructure. Here is ExxonMobil CEO Darren Woods.
With respect to Venezuela in particular, we have a very long history in Venezuela. In fact, we first got into Venezuela back in the 1940s. We've had our assets seized there twice. And so you can imagine to re-enter a third time would require some pretty significant changes from what we've historically seen here and what is currently the state. If we look at the legal and commercial constructs and frameworks in place today in Venezuela, today it's uninvestable. And so significant changes have to be made to those commercial frameworks, the legal system. There has to be durable investment protections, and there has to be a change to the hydrocarbon laws in the country. We're confident that with this administration and President Trump working hand in hand with the Venezuelan government, that those changes can be put in place.
Now, others who were in the meeting chose either not to commit or avoid the question altogether. ConocoPhillips CEO Ryan Lance stopped short of committing to operations in Venezuela, while a senior Chevron executive focused on the company's existing presence rather than any major expansion. And hovering over all of this is the concern among these executives of what will happen after the Trump administration is gone. Because members of Congress, members of the public have pledged that there is going to be accountability for what is perceived to be ongoing engagement in acts of corruption around this initial invasion and around how the aftermath of Venezuela might be monetized by the president, his allies, and others. I want to bring into the conversation to talk about the bigger picture, the geopolitical implications around this and other controversies of the week, former Deputy Director of National Intelligence, Sue Gordon, who is here with us. Sue, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Great to see you, Miles. Happy New Year. Well,
And
happy is a fascinating adjective.
we'll see what we can make it. We're also joined by the incredible award-winning journalist and former Pentagon correspondent for CNN, Barbara Starr. Barbara, hi, how are you?
Good to see you, Miles and Sue.
Right.
And as always, my Defiance.org co-founder, Xander Schultz, is here with us. Xander.
Hey,
There
friend.
he is.
Nice to see you all. I thought I was going to hang out in the green room. What a star-studded cast over here. I was having fun in the green room.
Yeah, well, because you're already geeking out of our incredible guests, we're just going to have to kick you out of the conversation,
Yeah.
Xander. No, great to have everyone here today. Look, I want to start with you, Barbara, not just on the conversations with oil executives, but that we got to this point so quickly. I mean, I have to say, if you go back to the invasion of Iraq, if within a week of the invasion of Iraq, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney had been sitting down with oil executives in front of the country, it would have been a gift to the political opposition to say, see, he's only doing this for oil. He's doing this for money. To me, it's extraordinary that within that first week, we haven't even gotten to the 1 week anniversary of the seizure of Nicolas Maduro, that they are having these conversations. What's the word on the street?
Well, look, Sue's going to know a lot more about this than I do. But actually, as a reporter, I covered oil markets for many years. And you hit the key point, Miles. For decades, many across the Middle East and across many parts of the world have long believed that the U.S. military has the goal of seizing oil fields, seizing oil production, seizing oil capacity around the world as part of U.S. military goals. And so far, it looks like the Trump administration, for the first time in a long time, is really proving them right. And there's a lot of concern about this. And the oil, I thought it was incredibly telling that you did not see these oil executives wholesale embrace President Trump's rhetoric and ideas about all this. These guys know what's at stake. They know what is needed to make it happen. They need security guarantees. They need legal guarantees, commercial guarantees. They're responsible to shareholders. They need people who are able to be insured to go in and do the work. They need long-term investment guarantees. This is not something that can be done over the next 3 years. And I think very little attention has been paid to what might happen in world oil markets if President Trump's plans were to come to pass. I mean, look, oil prices are down right now, somewhere around $58 a barrel. If you're going to start flooding the market with Venezuelan crude or refined oil products, prices are going to be driven down even further. That's going to make the Saudis very unhappy. They're going to see revenue dropping. There's a lot of global implications to all of this.
Sue, I want to ask you about exactly that, the global implications, but also a really, really interesting nugget out of this week is that one of your successors, Tulsi Gabbard, who's the director of national intelligence, was apparently left out of a lot of the conversations in the lead up to this invasion. Now, her criticisms of military interventionism are not a secret. I mean, she's run for public office on that platform. But the fact that the nation's spy chief was cut out of these conversations reportedly is a pretty big deal, is it not?
Yeah, I think it is. I don't think it's particularly surprising for this president. So what's the value of intelligence? The value of intelligence is you are forced to deal with inconvenient truths, because at its best, and the women and men of the intelligence community do a great job teeing this up, to say, here's what is, not what you prefer to be. And you walk into those meetings and you present it. And every president that I've ever served kind of slumps their shoulders when intelligence walks in the room, because they know we steal some of their decision space. The sound ones say, I still need to know that. President Trump does not like inconvenient things. And so I think it doesn't surprise me that the inconvenience of intelligence would be omitted from some of these meetings, because there are just some really big things that are wrong with this intellectually, in terms of, wait, you didn't replace the regime. How are you going to, you're still dealing with an incredibly corrupt system, and you're going to rebuild it? And what money? And where's that going to come from? And where it's going to go? And somehow you think you're going to exert leverage against Russia and China and Iran by holding them off with a corrupt regime that knows how to buy their way into it. So if intelligence had been in that meeting, they would have said, this is a lovely theory, but the likelihood of success in the long haul is vanishingly small. I think that's what you heard the oil executives saying is, neat, that'd be great, we'd love to profit from this, but we've seen this before, and we know it takes a much bigger system than that. And then the other thing I'll say that I believe that there is a little bit of a gift in this, if we do it right. The scales surely should have fallen off our eyes by now. This administration is about power leverage and material advantage. It isn't about values. It isn't about democracy. They use those words aperiodically, and they can confuse someone who wants to say, well, Maduro was a bad guy. But I think if you look around the globe, you can see very clearly the national strategy, if there is one, of this administration, and it's about power and material gain. And once you see that, I think then you start asking a lot of questions like Barbara was suggesting, or that I as a citizen would say is, hey, could you show me the ledger that says that that money is actually coming in to America to go against American priorities, and that we have a system executed by the Congress that says that we have priorities of our appropriations. So I think once we see it, I think it's easier for us to talk about it, particularly with a platform like this. And then the last thing I'd say, because I am a longtime intelligence officer, there are going to be some other people that are going to have a vote here. And we have now changed the dialogue, because now, oh, this is okay. Oh, you want dominance in your hemisphere? Oh, it's okay to do it if it's in your hemisphere? Oh, you control all that and you have sovereignty? Well, quit talking to us about Taiwan or Ukraine or any other of the states around. So I think something has been set into motion that is unlikely to end well. But if we do it right, I think we can talk about it now with some clarity that allows people who listen to say, oh, I see that. I see the precedent that's being set. I see the next action that's going to come, and I can weigh in on those rather than just shaking our fist at the cosmos.
Barbara, I want to pick up on what Sue was just saying, though, about the proceeds of this. I mean, this is becoming already a fast ballooning controversy here. Is the White House has said the proceeds of this oil being seized are going to be held in offshore accounts and not brought into the United States. And so, I mean, initially it sounds like it's not going to be the United States Treasury that holds this money. And there's a lot of question marks about what offshore accounts, whose offshore accounts, who's controlling this, and reports that it will be the executive office of the president making the decisions about how the money is going to be allocated, how barrels of oil are going to be allocated. This strikes you as something that's, at best, really, really ripe for corruption, but at worst, already well within that territory.
Well, yeah. And I think, these oil executives, they know the law, they know what's at risk. They have to make the decisions about whether they're willing to bet on a legal and good outcome for this investment. Because again, as you said right off the top, the Trump administration is not going to be there forever. And in 3 years or so after the next presidential election, after a change in Congress, when they get hauled in front of the Congress to testify about this, what are they going to say? They're going to know where the money is. They're going to know where those offshore accounts are. They're going to know how it's being paid for. And alongside all of that, I think we also need to consider, when we've talked about it has to be, some security guarantees that Venezuela will be safe for them to operate in. Yes, President Trump has called off a second attack for now, but how can we anticipate how he might use the U.S. military again, even if Congress tries to stop him? He's very clear. He believes there, I think he said it in one of his social media postings, or in an interview rather, he believes there's no limits on his power other than his own mortality. So is he going to call the U.S. military back into Venezuela to do more, perhaps even while he's calling them to do something in Greenland, for example?
Well, I want to ask you both about that and the U.S. Congress taking steps. It was an initial procedural vote for an authorization for the use of military force to draw red lines on what the president is able to do. Barbara, why don't I just go to you first on this? How significant of a development is this that there are even 5 Republican senators that are effectively defectors from what the president wants them to do, who have agreed to take initial steps to hem in his authority around Venezuela?
I think it's very significant because his reaction alone tells us how worried he is. He said, that they should not be in office, and he sort of verbally was very hostile to them. Look, if you're going to send troops back into Venezuela, there's one question at the forefront. Are you willing to sacrifice American lives? Are you willing, heaven forbid, to have American caskets return to Dover Air Force Base with families if something goes terribly wrong? Thankfully, in this initial attack to get Maduro, some troops were wounded. They are recovering. They're all fine. But it just demonstrates once again, Venezuela is a big country, lots of people with different points of view, different ideologies. How are you going to protect the oil fields? Are you going to have U.S. troops protecting them? And if it goes terribly wrong, are you willing to have U.S. caskets being returned to the U.S.? To me, at least, that's the fundamental question.
Yeah. Sue, on that point, what are your thoughts? I mean, if you were still at ODNI and you saw that Congress was getting ready to restrict your ability to operate in foreign territory, that's pretty significant pushback.
Yeah, huzzah, yay, a Congress. My gosh, we might see the return of one of the three branches of our government. I mean, it's a small sign, but I think it's a good sign. And again, the value is in not letting there be one storyline about what either the value or the outcome is going to be. So I don't know that it's huge, but I think it's an important step toward achieving some accountability for the decisions that we're making on behalf of the nation. I don't know how to say this more clearly. The coolest thing about America over the course of my career, and when I think about it, is that people who serve in office are renters of that position, and the office is more important than the person, right? So the idea that we have come to a place that an individual who happens to be the president says that Donald Trump, can decree whatever happens. I don't care about Donald Trump. I care about what the president is doing, and that is bound by the rule of law and the other branches of government. So I think it's a good sign. To Barbara's point about U.S. lives, as the mom of two children who have served in combat, I'll tell you what, you can't keep bad things from happening, but you better make sure that what you're asking them to do is worth it. And so the more that we can have national dialogue, the more questions that are asked, the more tension that is put on these decisions, that gives the American people a chance to see that's what's being done in their name. And I think we have to just keep hitting that. All these actions that are coming out of the White House, they're being done in America's names, our names. And so the more time we have and illumination we have of what's behind these actions, what the precedents being set and the consequences likely to occur, I think the better we are. I'm sorry it's taking us so long to get there, but I'm grateful for every second of it.
Xander? Oh, you're on mute.
Xander probably saying,
Of course I am. I just want to take a step back and just remind everyone what timeline we're on. We're in the midst of a climate crisis and also the golden era of renewable energy technology. And there's a different timeline where leadership in place goes, the greatest way to national security is to ensure that this country is able to produce all the energy it needs sustainably, and we're not relying on the Saudis or the Venezuelans or any other country. And so I think it's worth mentioning just how insane this timeline is. Look, nation state scale robbery of other countries of their resources was never a good thing. We participate in things like that far too often. especially dumb when you don't need to. And I think Trump canceled some massive amount of solar farms and whatnot that we were on our way to building. We had we passed some massive legislation under Biden to build that infrastructure to make us sustainable and make us have more energy sovereignty. And we cancel all that. So I just wanted to call that out. It's just how, because we're kind of debating whether within his strategy he's being effective. It's such an unnecessary adventure. Also, the oil executive statements remind me a little bit of Trump's failure in reshoring, in that Trump is expecting the private sector to participate if he creates the conditions. He's like, I'm going to tariff the world. You're going to build factories back here again, right? But if you are so inconsistent and so unreliable, the private sector is not going to play with you like that. And the American people, unfortunately, aren't even going to get the outcomes that Trump says he could deliver.
Oh, no way. Right.
Yeah. So I just want to make those 2 points before we moved on.
Wingo.
Yeah, I want to bring up Greenland with you both. Look, I mean, this is folks rightfully paid a lot of attention to what was happening in Minnesota this week. We're going to get to that in the program. There's some big developments there and everything that's going on in Venezuela. But I think that national security watchers, more than anything, have been most shocked at the administration's rhetoric around Greenland. Why? Because even one U.S. troop setting a boot in hostility on the territory of a NATO ally is a domino push that can destroy the Western world that has been built over the 75 years since World War II. It would automatically trigger Article 5 of NATO. It would automatically turn almost all of America's closest friends into its de facto enemies if that happened. Now, there's a lot of steps between now and that actually happening, but this administration has closed that delta with its rhetoric in just the past few days by suggesting that all options are on the table for the United States to take allied territory in Greenland. Barbara, I want to ask you about what you're hearing in those conversations, especially how foreign allies are reacting now that Marco Rubio is set to meet with Danish officials next week to talk about this.
Well, I guess the latest is, right, that, the U.S. administration wants to buy it. Again, using money as a weapon of, I don't know, using money as a weapon of war, I think. I'm not really sure I know how else to express it. And again, another unnecessary action. The U.S. has had bases in Greenland, has been able to operate up there. Not clear that they ever asked to expand the U.S. military footprint if they believe Russia and China are at risk of dominating somehow Greenland. They could accomplish some of these goals by simply increasing the U.S. military presence in that region. Do we even have the forces capabilities to run Greenland? We're going to run Greenland too. The weather issues up there, the geography, very significant limitations on what the U.S. might be able to reasonably do. And again, we're talking about a 3-year time frame, because one way or the other, Donald Trump will not be president after the next election if he obeys the law. So this is again a very high risk thing that he's embarked on. And it looks like he wants to try and convince the people of Greenland that he'll pay them and that they'll willingly join the United States. I don't think that's at all clear. The threat to NATO will, in fact, change the world forever. And this, again, becomes an issue that Congress, I think, is just simply going to have to deal with.
Sue, there have been reports, unconfirmed reports, that the administration is already engaged in information operations in Greenland.
Yep.
Now, you had a whole career in the American spy community. I don't want you to divulge things that you wouldn't divulge anyway, but surely the United States has a history of softening the information battlefield in hostile countries where we invaded. I cannot think of any example in my little career in 20 years in the national security community of us engaging in information operations on allied territory in the country of a close friend in preparation for anything close to an invasion. I want to get your response to that. You were Trump's top spy chief. I'd imagine there would have been a resignation letter on his desk if he had ordered you to do something along those lines.
So I don't have any particular knowledge or classified information that would I share, but this is just Looney Tunes. This is just Looney Tunes. If we want to talk about information operations are really complex, really difficult, particularly influence operations. They almost always go horribly wrong because we don't understand the coupling mechanisms particularly well, which is why we typically have a rule of law and some moral bandwidths on what we do, because we understand we don't want spillover effects. So to the extent that it is true that we're engaging in information operations against our allies and partners, I would encourage us to look in the history book on that. But just the whole premise of taking Greenland and to kind of sanewash it, to choose that word in the name of national security. Listen, in 2026, national security is through alliances and shared partnership and power and stuff like that. We don't need this to be secure. This is, for all the reasons Barbara said, problematic. For every reason you said, it would end an alliance. But I'm just going to go further. There is no justification. It makes no sense. And to me, if any action we're taking against it, that should be a predicate for Congress to take the action that it alone has and that our founders gave them. I mean, this is just nuts. And if he does it, there is no rationale. There isn't the fig leaf of counter narcotics. There isn't what he used in Nigeria and the Sahel against Christians. There isn't anything that you can hang on that action that would make it make any kind of sense and should be viewed in those terms. But other than that, I think it's probably fine.
Sorry, I'm stuck on that last comment, Sue. Other than that, it's probably fine.
Barbara said it so eloquently, and I should have just said what Barbara said.
Oh no!
But I just think it's bigger than that. Right here, in almost every other case, people who try and see sense can find something. I mean, we're going to talk about what happened in Minnesota, and there will be people that say you need to follow the directions of legal authorities, and everyone is trying to find sense. And that Maduro's a bad guy, and we care about this, or that in almost every other case, you can find something that you can hang sunset, that people who want it to be reasonable can find. I can find nothing with Greenland. And if it proceeds, we ought to be very clear-eyed about what that means.
Well, Barbara, I know we have to let you go. I want to ask you a final question here, which is, in your eyes, has the damage already been done here with the administration talking about even the possibility of military action in Greenland? And to put that more directly, are American allies already being forced into the position of planning for a world without the United States because of the bellicose rhetoric from the White House?
Well, I think, but again, Sue would know more about this than me. I think it is likely that intelligence services across Europe are looking at all scenarios. It would be very sensible for them to, including NATO security elements, it would be very sensible for them to do that. It would be sensible for them, I think, as well, to reach out to Russia and China behind the scenes as much as they reasonably can and try and get a sense of Russian and Chinese thinking about all of this. Here in the United States, is the damage done? Maybe to some extent. What could stop the damage, I think, takes us back into the political arena. Republicans and Democrats, especially the Republicans in Congress, what will make them, wake up and be public about their opposition to some of this? If they think that this leads them down the road to a debacle in the midterms, if they think that the Republicans believe they're going to wholesale get voted out of office, watch how fast they will be in opposition to the president and hopefully pass additional measures to restrict his abilities, both economically, financially, and militarily. It's going to require all of those elements, not just some kind of war powers resolution. I think that we're going to have to see them believe that they are at political risk before they really aggressively move out and take action.
Well, Barbara Starr, like Sue Gordon said, we depend on you and your analysis. We're going to want to stick with you on this one in the weeks to come. I know we have to let you go. Thank you for joining us, my friend. Barbara Starr, award-winning journalist and former CNN Pentagon correspondent.
Great to be with all of you folks. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Sue sticks with us. Let me get through this next one and bring her and Xander back into the conversation. The other massive story this week, of course, is the execution of Renee Good in Minnesota. Now, there's new footage out that I want to be able to show you today. And trigger warning here, folks, this is disturbing footage, like the footage you have seen this week. But it's very important because the debate this week across this country is whether there was an act of domestic terrorism, words that I'll talk about on the back end with our friend Sue Gordon, whether there was an act of domestic terrorism. And this new footage, this first-person footage from the ICE officer who engaged in that shooting, casts additional light on that claim.
Change our plates every morning, just so you know. It'll be the same plate when you come talk to us later. That's fine. U.S. citizen, former fucking country. You want to come at us? You want to come at us? I say go get yourself some lunch, big boy. Go ahead.
Out of the car. Get out of the fucking car. Get out of the car.
Oh!
It's hard footage to watch, even harder when you see the captions. You see what was said. You see what that officer said in the wake of firing those shots. Now, also, what you didn't see in the captions there are reports that one of the officers was saying, "Get out of here," to the driver, while another was saying, "Get out of the car." Conflicting orders being issued to the woman. But the thing hovering over all of this is the thing that the White House continues to double down on. The reason why there are expected to be nationwide protests across this country, and that is the claim that this was an act of domestic terrorism. Terrorism, which has a very specific definition in U.S. law, which we'll get to. And the administration said that before the footage was released. They are continuing to assert that this woman in her Honda that was leaving a volatile scene, who had a dog in the back and stuffed animals in a glove compartment, was engaged in a premeditated act of domestic terrorism. I want to bring Sue Gordon and Xander back into the conversation here. Sue, in your career, you have responded to literally dozens of terrorist attacks in the United States and around the world. How did you process those claims from the administration from a public safety and national security perspective?
To me, and I'm not a lawyer and not law enforcement, but as an intelligence officer, having seen the rise of terrorism as a threat to only the acts that we saw meet the U.S. definition, the legal definition of domestic terrorism, but you are almost inciting terror by naming that action. The consequence of taking that moniker and putting it on U.S. citizens doing what we do, which is express displeasure with the actions of our government, and then to label it something that has such an emotional, incendiary consequential name is just feels irresponsible and or intentional to actually terrorize the public differently and to justify almost any act by the authorities. So to me, as just a citizen, and this isn't who spent a lot of time with the consequence of actual terrorist acts, this feels both irresponsible and intended to incite exactly the kind of ideological rhetoric that it's intended to stop.
Well, I'm glad that you say it that way, Sue, because if I had been your chief of staff during the Trump administration and not at DHS, or let's switch that around. If you had been Secretary of Homeland Security and I was your chief of staff, one of the first things that I would have said to you after this happened, as you were, preparing remarks to go out there publicly, is we had an officer firing shots at an American citizen. We don't want to fire more shots. You don't want to keep pulling the trigger on the gun. And rhetorically, what you do next is the answer to that question of whether you're going to keep firing the gun as a government or if you're going to let things cool off. And that happens with rhetoric because the words from senior officials, from Trump, from his cabinet secretaries, can incite more violence. And immediately rushing to the conclusion that this was an act of domestic terrorism does exactly that. It fans the flames of public turmoil in the wake of one of these things. I mean, I think back to when you and I would be on those interagency calls after a terrorist attack, is often we would rush to not labeling something an act of terrorism until we knew. I mean, almost reflexively. In fact, I could pull this up on my phone. I kept an unclassified checklist of this is what we do after a terrorist attack. And I hate to say it, but that got so routine, especially during the rise of ISIS, that you would not know on any given day when there might be an attack disrupted or a plot on a bridge in the United Kingdom where DHS, where Odie and I would have to say, hey, here's our checklist. This is what we usually say after a terrorist attack. This is what we do. Here's what we say about the investigation. And top of that list was making sure we didn't get ahead of the facts in the investigation. And it seems to be the first thing that this team threw out the window.
Yeah, so just from it, I can't wait to hear what Xander said, because this is a conversation, with America right now, right? The complete failure of any leadership that we understand in these kind of moments, how important every word is, how you don't send the boss out to make the final statement before you know anything. We knew nothing when they started saying it. And now you have people aligning because they want to appear to please that. I mean, there were so many ways you could go after this. Regardless of how it turns out, there are so many things you could have said. All of it would have been around calm. We have things to discover. We have done this or that. And that you don't do that is either you're really woefully bad at leadership, or you have a different objective, which is to continue to create an environment that allows you to pursue your agenda without check. And either one of those is breathtakingly bad.
Yeah, this reminds me a little bit. I had a conversation with Frank Luntz, who is a Republican messaging strategist. He's largely credited with coining the term climate change instead of global warming because it was less scary, and he led some of the strategy around that. And he told me he knew his people were going to get their ass kicked in the debates, but most Americans would just remember that there was a debate, and your average person just ascribes 50% to any debate they see happening, no matter who's getting their ass kicked in that debate. They quickly forget what the debate is. And so I think in some ways we're doing the administration a favor debating whether this is terrorism. Yep. They don't believe it. No one believes it. Yeah. No one's seen the video believes it. No one believed it beforehand. We know what their strategy is. We know they're trying to incite violence. We know they're trying to occupy neighborhoods and create these types of reactions so they can have more and more excuses. So the next time they claim domestic terrorism, it's a little bit more real because someone punched an ICE agent or whatnot. And so we need to know they don't believe it either. They're gaslighting us, and they just want us having this conversation versus strategizing on how to get these guys the fuck out of our cities and how to win the midterms and get leadership the fuck out of here. Excuse my language. And so just know, like, this is a debate we can win, just like we could win the climate change debate when that was going on as well. But they just want us preoccupied with these types of conversations. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I love that. And the only thing I'd add to it is the other thing that they've convinced the American people is that the only way to solve the immigration problem, which they know they have some advantage on, is that you have to do these things. No, you do not. And so I think that's one of the other things that has to be countered. But
100%.
I take your
and
point.
so to that point, the Somali community, which is why ICE had to have this big deployment in Minneapolis, 90% are born in America.
Right.
It's not even a big immigration issue.
Right.
90% are born in America. The other 10% have papers. Like, there's not a massive immigration issue. Now they're saying there's fraud and these other things. Why is ICE there? It makes no sense why ICE is there to deal with that issue. There's not a large immigrant Somalian population amongst that population. I think a lot of people don't know that. The whole pretense of ICE's deployment there is bullshit.
Right. And I think we don't say that enough either. And that people have been convinced that if I want that, I must have this. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Sue, I want to ask you about, their allegations are that the victim was part of something called ICE Watch, which is basically, a Facebook group to alert people when, ICE is in their communities, certainly not ISIS or Al Qaeda. And I think Xander's right. I don't even think we dignify the allegation that this is terrorism with a response. But I mean, the claims are getting increasingly ridiculous. But underneath the surface of this, there is an even more serious national security story here, which is that former agency, which I'm intimately familiar with, is being co-opted into the type of domestic police force that we debated after 9/11 whether to have in this country, and which very decisively Congress said, no, we are not going to have that. We're not going to have those types of domestic surveillance powers. And there may have been points where you or I even said, shoot, Congress is really hamstringing us against these bad guys. But now there are reports, including this week, that ICE is buying tools like Weblock that allow them to draw a circle around entire neighborhoods and do cell phone tracking without a warrant. I mean, you were one of the top spy officials in the Trump administration. How do you react to that?
Well, first of all, I just say, like the oil executives, the reason why they're massively wealthy is because of the rule of law. And the reason why we are as a nation as safe as secure as we are is because of the rule of law. So this idea of escalating government privilege as a way to make us more secure is antithetical to who we are. As a matter of fact, I am on the record of saying, if you make me choose between privacy and national security, I will choose privacy every day of the week and twice on Sundays. So that's just true. Second, the idea that technology alone is enough of a tool for you to decide to take action is crazy, go nuts. And if you add on top of that the lack of training, the lack of time on task that most of these people have, combined with tools that allow them to believe something just because of a technical hit, is really problematic. And then finally, I just don't even know what I would do as a citizen. And I don't meet any profile. What I would do if someone came rushing up to me, I'm a company gal. I'm a law and order person. But if someone looking like those guys comes rushing up to me and gives me an order or grabs me, just like, sorry about that. You're going to have to show me who you are. And that somehow that is being blown over. So we've just set up this escalating, too much dependence on technology, lack of skill set of the humans involved, and then blowing past the rule of law and the authority that are granted. And if you wonder why we have citizens groups that are standing in between people, it is that we're incredibly well aware of. And so if we don't want these groups to continue to persist. We have to fix the problem that we have created that lead to them.
And by the way, Sue, to your point about, I don't know how I'd react. The reason a lot of these ICE Watch groups exist is to train people in how to react, because we can't trust their training.
Right.
So the whole purpose of them is the opposite of what they're claiming. It's so people know their rights, know when they're committing crimes and what they shouldn't do.
Right.
It's telling that Renee's last words were, what were the last? I don't hate you, or I'm
not mad at you.
I'm not mad at you. It's like that. Yeah, that wasn't Bin Laden's words before 9/11. This is not someone that's out there, to get in the way. And the reason she's probably using that language and being unintimidating is because she probably was a part of this group that was teaching her how to behave and how to react here. And so these groups serve that exact purpose that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, Sue Gordon, I know we've kept you in overtime here. I just have to say, I say this every time we're together. You are a patriot. You are an inspiration. We're immensely grateful for your insights across these issues, your public service, and your friendship.
Well, thanks. I once got a piece of advice that I try and apply, which is don't give in to bureaucracy. And if it looks like it's going to win, refuse to cooperate.
Amen.
Thanks, Sue.
I think that might make it onto one of our hats or T-shirts. Thank you, my friend. So great to have you today. Xander, I will just say there's a couple other things to flag on this story. And, one of them is not that I expected anything different from my former boss, but the president continued to double down today. And his response, I think, was just completely shameful. I want to play that clip if we have it.
Go ahead.
On Minneapolis, Mr. President, I have a follow-up for you. The state officials there have said that the FBI is not sharing evidence with them. Typically, they would conduct a joint investigation, as you know. Do you believe that the FBI should be sharing evidence with state officials in Minnesota?
Well, normally I would, but they're crooked officials. I mean, Minneapolis and Minnesota, what a beautiful place, but it's being destroyed. It's got an incompetent governor, fool. I mean, he's a stupid person. And it looks like the number could be $19 billion stolen from a lot of people, but largely people from Somalia. They buy their vote. They vote in a group. They buy their vote. They sell more Mercedes-Benzes in that area than almost. Can you imagine? You come over with no money, and then shortly thereafter you're driving a Mercedes-Benz. The whole thing is ridiculous. So they're very corrupt people. It's a very corrupt state. I feel that I won Minnesota. I think I won it all 3 times. Nobody's won it since Richard Nixon won it many, many years ago. I won it all 3 times, in my opinion.
I won Minnesota. A woman is dead. A woman was killed by the U.S. government. And Donald Trump is pivoting to his favorite talking point, Xander, which is he won the state by amazing numbers. No one's ever done it quite like this. And by the way, Somalis are corrupt and they're garbage.
Yeah. Hey, Miles, when someone used to say they were an immigrant and then a few years later they had a Mercedes-Benz, you know what they would call that? They would call that the American dream. That's what we were good at, is people immigrating here, finding success, finding their own community, getting rooted here and having success. That was the American dream. What do you mean it's inherently corrupt? I don't know. I'm fired up about it. I'm the outrage guy today. I feel like every time I've been on, I'm so fucking fired up.
Well, I mean, look, sending thousands of officers to go investigate accounting at kindergartens. I mean, I just can't get over that. I mean, like that's why we are seeing the presence that we are seeing in Minnesota. 2 things. 1, the president's deep ingrained bias towards Somalis. This is not reckless speculation. I was there in those meetings in the Oval Office when the president, when we would talk about immigration, would keep bringing up Somalis. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know what vendor he dealt with that was a Somali that he feels like screwed him. But the guy doesn't have national security and public safety reasons for hating Somalis. Trust me, Donald Trump didn't know anything about accounting irregularities in Somali kindergartens in Minnesota in 2017, 18, and 19, when he was telling people like me he wanted to get them all the hell out of the country and prevent Somalis from coming in. It was underlying bigotry. That's point number 1. That's one reason we're there. Reason number 2 is a YouTuber, a podcaster, pointed to years-old allegations about fraud in a federal program, which happened to have some Somalis allegedly taking advantage of it. I don't care if it was a lot of Somalis. This is common. And I say this as a libertarian conservative. There's fraud all across the United States government, but it's not the reason you go send 2,000 agents in to target an ethnic community. That's what we're talking about here. And it's just extraordinary, not to mention, again, the deeply disrespectful behavior in the wake of this woman's death.
Miles, you know the different agencies within the federal government. Even if that's happening, it's a big crisis. How far down the list do you go before you say ICE is the right department to send in for that problem? It doesn't make any sense to send that group to solve that problem.
Yeah, I mean, in normal times, you're talking about a DOJ investigation,
sure,
and bringing in the FBI, and then ICE gets brought in when there's an immigration angle or some other angle here. They're just going straight towards militarized response. And then, of course, yesterday, Xander, we saw the news reports out of Portland of another shooting. And I go back to the conditions are set here for this all to become systematized. Undertrained, underqualified, ideologically motivated recruits are being brought into the largest federal law enforcement agency in America, dispatched onto U.S. city streets to roam them with loaded weapons, and with the president of the United States saying they have, in his words, total authorization to use whatever means necessary to go after protesters who he calls thugs, and the vice president saying they have absolute immunity. How could you not hear those facts and say they're a recipe for disaster? In the Republican Party, I would have gone ballistic against the Obama administration or the Biden administration if those set of factors were put into place. I would say these guys are about to tear this country apart by doing that.
Yeah, I think we can finally put to bed this idea that the Republicans in office are going to show up in some major way. There's been too many things that have happened domestically where we keep looking over there and go, how about Congress now? Are you going to do something now? Is this a bridge too far now? It's not going to happen. I'm increasingly convinced of it. Of course, their arguments are in bad faith. It is an effective strategy if your goal is to create chaos and then use chaos as a ladder to move more and more power to the executive branch. It's not a great goal if you're trying to run a country that's peaceful and a nice place to live for everyone. Yeah, man, we're not in a good spot. And I'm excited to see. My sister was actually on site when that shooting happened in Portland. I live in Portland. My sister was there. Her building got surrounded. She had to stay in there for a little while and then got out. I talked to her directly after. This is not the country we want to live in. Portland is great at rallying in these moments. They have like this activist DNA in them, but I think a lot of America is starting to build that muscle as well. The only positive side in these dramatic, shitty events is that it is emboldening more and more of us to say, I'm going to take a significant chunk of my day, my time, my energy to be a part of shutting this down. And so that's the only kind of silver lining.
Well, and that takes us to the usual end of our program. We end every day with a segment called Who is Joining the Defiance? And today we're going to talk about folks who have been standing up in the wake of this. And we want to touch on a group of workers in particular who have been in the crosshairs of ICE. As a matter of fact, just hours after the killing of Renee Good, CBP and Greg Bovino, who you know as the very famous CBP officer who's been going into these communities around the country, targeted Uber drivers at a local airport. Luckily for us, one Uber driver, was there to call them out.
Isn't this crazy though? You guys are doing a crazy job going everywhere. You literally appreciate that. That's crazy. Yes. But the thing is, you just going off the wrong shit. You gotta find the criminals, man, not the people working. This is an Uber waiting lot. We're literally working. You know, I've been here since. Look, criminals doing Uber? Oh yeah. That's not how it works, brother. Maybe criminals are doing ICE. How about that? You know what I'm saying? You guys shooting at people, man. Somebody just got shot for what? Why did you guys shoot that lady? Answer me that. There's an officer today that shot a lady in the head, dude. Really? For what? I don't know why they do that, man. You got all these stuff. You could have just got her, man. She's not gonna like fly out of the country.
Look, I have to say, Xander, that gentleman is joining the Defiance today, but a lot of people like him. And I'm going to add an addenda to that. And this is a note of optimism. I think this week we are going to see a lot of people joining the Defiance in this country. If folks are not aware, there are going to be nationwide protests this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. One of our partner organizations, our good friends over at Indivisible, are leading a major effort in hundreds of cities around the country to go out there to speak out and to bring others to speak out who maybe haven't gone to things like this before. And Xander, you and I talked about this earlier today on a weekly coffee with our members, is that, you know, many of us are very, very invested in this cause. There are folks who want to be, but just don't have the entry point or the invitation. So not only would I urge people to go find their local protest this weekend if they are as motivated as we are about these issues, but bring someone else. Go into your phone, go into the most recent 10 or 20 people you've texted and say, you know, who could I bring with me to go to the courthouse or wherever the protest is for a half hour, for an hour on a Saturday or Sunday? Because that image matters. The number of people getting out there matters. And there's a lot of things. Every week we give our members very specific ways that they can counter Trump's abuses of power. But one of the most potent, one of the most powerful is showing up.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who sit on the outside of these conversations, on the outside of this activity, don't understand how fun and communal it can be also. And so they see volatile debates on CNN and go, ugh, I don't want to have anything to do with that world. It sounds nasty. Everyone seems like they're lying. I don't want to be a part of it. Those people don't understand what awaits in terms of local, real political activism, the community, the excitement, the positivity. Go make it a day. Try to get a bunch of friends out who don't usually do these things. Grab coffee in the beginning, grab lunch at the end, whatever you have to do to get them out and normalize this. This is
feed them and give them coffee.
Yeah, seriously, put them on the team. You're a college basketball coach. You're recruiting players. Get them on the team. We need them on the team. We can't just do this with the usual suspects who care deeply about this and listen to our podcast and then listen to our friends' podcasts, etc. We need to broaden the community. And so, it's an easy thing to do. Go have coffee with a friend. Go have a nice lunch afterwards. Take them on a walk.
I got to give compliments to some of our members in the chat over on Substack. Alice says she's already recruited friends to go with her. A number of folks in the chat say they're going to be out there this weekend. Laura and a number of different folks. We're going to be out there, Xander and I, this weekend. This is a moment to show that we're not going to let a tragedy like this week be forgotten. This symbolizes everything that we have been worried about in terms of the power abuses of this administration. A conservative like me, a socialist like Xander are all motivated to go out there on the streets to talk about what this means, to stand together and show solidarity. And again, if you think that doesn't matter, just look at the news right now about what's happening in Iran. Now, I think that this administration should care as much about protests in the United States as they do protests in Iran.
Yeah,
but those people taking to the streets are engaged in an action that media outlets everywhere are talking about could lead to the downfall of this regime. At a minimum, us showing up in big numbers this weekend will hold this administration accountable in the way that they should be. So really proud of all the folks who are going out there to do this. Xander, we've got a couple of other questions in the chat. We've got one in there about whether Agent Ross might be prosecuted for a hate crime. Now, neither of us are lawyers, but I want to get your reaction overall to accountability in the wake of what happened this week in Minnesota.
Starts at the top. This is what the folks running these organizations want to see. There's going to be no accountability, and it is, as we can see already in Minnesota, it can be if the federal government doesn't want to play nice, it can be extremely hard for states to hold officers accountable. I wouldn't bet on it. Trump also has pardon power, even if somehow we do go through some sort of case while the president is in office. So no, this is gonna have to be about change at the top. We're going to see more of this, like we saw in Portland already. We've got a group that is told point blank during a national press conference, mind you, by J.D. Vance, they have total immunity. So, we can expect more of this. It's going to be uglier. We're not going to see accountability for this guy. Like you said, Miles, I'm not a lawyer. This is just, my sense of things.
Arlene Mock also asks in the chat, are the Dems going to show up? And I think this is one of those moments. And Arlene, I'm going to just assume what you mean by that, which is that we've seen a lot of Democratic leaders responding to the abuses of power of the Trump administration, kind of like normal political times.
Yeah.
Put out a press release, go out there, put out some talking points, send out a mean tweet. This is existential for our republic. And I think folks just want to see the fire in the belly. I'm not trying to pat me and Xander on the back, but we come onto the show into the evenings. It's not like our producer Mercedes says, you got to show fire in the belly, guys. I mean, we care because this is shocking. This is our country. Our own personal political philosophies are totally subordinate to the fact that there are Americans who believe in the supremacy of the United States Constitution, not the supremacy of some race, not the supremacy of some creed, the supremacy of the United States Constitution, which continues to be violated by this administration. Could we see some of that fire in the belly from Democrats? Now, some of them are. I'll tell you, Xander, last night, I think it was last night, I was on Nicole Wallace on MS Now with Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut. He's one of those Democrats that's got fire in the belly about this. He is as motivated as he needs to be to meet this moment. I'm hoping that we're going to see other Democratic leaders, other opposition figures in this country start to meet the moment.
Yeah, Democrats are in a tough position in some ways because you're trying to, I think, to be successful in this moment, you have to simultaneously criticize the failures of our institutions, which a lot of Americans are upset and animated by, and say we need to still have institutions. We can't just wipe them out because we don't like how they've been performing over the last few decades. And it's understandable. And so I think there's this challenge of speaking to at least the anger that Trump's been able to tap into, which I think the Democrats have mostly done a poor job of, with Bernie outstanding and a couple other folks, Chris Murphy, to your point. It's a challenging thing to do. They got to figure out how to navigate it. They got to figure out why Americans are pissed off, why this is even, a coin toss between a complete fascist and their offering. Speak to those frustrations, but then also speak to an alternative that isn't tear it all down and give, one guy complete power to do what he will. So it is challenging, especially for folks that are in Congress that are one of, 435 votes. Or 100 votes. It's a lot of those guys are voting the ways you would hope they would. They just don't have all that much power. That's why governors have been so inspiring because they do have executive authority. They are able to do things. But in terms of a vibe, Miles, I think you're totally right. Like people want to see their anger expressed by their representative and some energy shown by them. A lot of these guys grew up in a different school of politics. They were trained in a certain way. A lot of them are older. They're trained in a certain way. And so it's a big course correction or course adjustment for them to move out of this like politics as usual narrative, civility, getting to your, talking points, et cetera. But people want to see authentic leadership right now.
That's right. And Colleen Commons, I noticed what you say in the chat as well. Please don't pass on the rhetoric of Vance and the administration. These officers don't have immunity, especially at the state level. You are right. Take it from someone who spent years at DHS overseeing ICE. These agents don't have absolute immunity to do whatever they want. Law enforcement officers do have immunity to be able to engage in routine lawful actions that they're supposed to. You can't sue a police officer for arresting you if you committed a crime. You can't bankrupt them for that, but they don't have a license to kill. And that's the message of this week. So defiance.org members, thank you for your questions in the chat. As always, I would also urge people this weekend, go out there, stay safe, stay peaceful. That is the point. These are going to be peaceful protests. It's really important that we keep emphasizing that. There's people should not roll their eyes like it's a kindergarten teacher saying, now don't get into trouble. It is really critically important that you not give this regime the talking point they so desperately want, which is that the political opposition is violent and we have to crack down on them. Nonviolent movements have changed countries. They've changed societies. They will do it again. We are going to win this, folks. I am telling you, we are going to win this. Our numbers are enormous at this point. There are more of us than them. And I say that even when talking about the people who voted for Donald Trump to come back into office, because they didn't vote for this. Most of them didn't vote for this. Donald Trump and the administration sold them a bill of goods about immigration. They were going to focus on criminal aliens and only criminal aliens. And we talked about this on our coffee today. 90% of the people ICE is picking up right now are not criminal aliens. They are people with no criminal record. It was a lie. It was a lie. And whether you disagree or agree with the 75 million people who voted for Donald Trump, a lot of them did not vote for this. Most of them did not vote for this. They voted for the thing that the administration lied to them about. So let's get out there this weekend. Let's be peaceful. Let's show them that Democrats, Republicans, and independents oppose what they are doing, oppose these abuses of power. Thank you so much, friends, for being with us. As we always say at the end of our program, stay loud, especially this weekend. Stay brave, especially this weekend. And stay together, especially this weekend. This has been Defiance Daily, dispatches for the Defiant. Thank you so much. We'll see you at Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern.